Hello, friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and in this episode, we sit down with the Amazing Johnathan, and you're going to learn exactly what makes him so amazing. We hear about performing in the most incredible venues, and I mean incredible sometimes, like performing in strip clubs, as well as performing in the most incredible venues, ginormous casinos, and living the life of a successful performer. You're also going to learn about how he wrote comedy, how you can write comedy and comedy magic, how you can create, how you can think about your act and your show, and so much more. This was a ton of fun. You'll learn about two battling documentaries that came out right now, how and where to check them out. There's so many lessons to be learned in this episode. Not only was it an episode with a legend, but it was legendary too. I think you're going to love it. Here it is, the one and only Amazing Johnathan. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and we are here with the one and only, the Wizard of Odd, the Amazing Johnathan. How are you?
I'm fine. Living the dream.
So basically, I've spent the last week watching every Amazing Johnathan clip that I possibly could to get in the zone, which involved watching 2 documentaries and videos that were so deep on the internet. It was just me and a couple dozen other people that have seen it. So I've seen every Amazing Johnathan clip now, and I have so much to talk about and get into. Let's start at the very beginning. So how did you get into magic?
I wandered into a magic shop by my house in Detroit, Michigan. It was owned by a guy named Bob Motes, and I just wandered in there, and he showed me a few things, and I ended up walking out with multiplying rabbits and the card trick where you say pick a card. No, you say pick a card, and then you say this is your card's on this card.
Oh yeah, it's on here.
Right, it's on here, and every single card is on there. Those are the 2 tricks I took away and got me hooked. The multiplying foam rabbits, I got pretty decent at. So I just kept going back there and buying stuff every weekend. I buy more and more and more. The Chinese wands were next, and then I started making my own stuff, squared circles, and just like every other magician, you make your own easy tricks. But it was good. It was good. It helped me out because in school I wasn't real popular, and this kind of set me aside from the rest. I had something finally that made me stand out a little.
So you eventually ended up doing a talent show at that school. Was that before or after people knew you as the guy who did magic?
Well, that was after people knew me as the guy. See, what really solidified my magic abilities was the spoon bending that I had made up using misdirection, and I could bend the spoon when they weren't looking, or I could bend some really heavy-duty objects just by, wedging them underneath the table or when they weren't looking. But I was pretty good at misdirection. That's what taught me misdirection. So I did it for my physics teacher, and he was really impressed with me being able to bend metal spoons. Everybody at that time was like a big Uri Geller fan. He had a best-selling book. So he asked me point blank to my face if I was doing it for real or was it a trick. And I wanted to be cool, and I lied to him and I said I could do it for real, thinking that would be the end of it. But next hour I was called to the principal's office over the loudspeaker, and when I walked in there, my parents were in there, and there was a bunch of spoons on my principal's desk, and I knew I was screwed, man. I just said, how am I going to get out of this? So I proceeded to bend all these spoons for him, and there was a local reporter from the Macomb Daily, small paper in Michigan, and they were going to do a whole story on me and my psychic abilities. And I figured if the magicians in town read that, I would be, labeled a big liar. Right. So I had to get out of it somehow. So the way I got out of it was my mom took me aside and she said, "Can you really do this, or are you just having us on?" And I lied to her again, and I said, "I'm really doing it." So it just kept snowballing into this big thing. And the way I got out of it was by telling them I didn't want to be a freak in school. I wanted to be a regular kid. And by doing that, my mom killed the story. And everybody knew about it. It leaked. I made sure it leaked. So all the other kids in school thought I had this weird power.
Oh my goodness.
I know. It really helped me out, though.
It's
You know,
great.
as a one big lie helped me out. Girls were attracted to me again. They thought I was a mysterious magician, and I could read their minds. And if I could get their license out of their purse, which I usually did when they went in the bathroom or something, I could tell them their zodiac sign and all kinds of things about their life.
Did you treat that kind of like seriously, or was it all a one big joke?
To me, it was one big joke. To them, it was serious. And I used my power for evil, I have to say.
It seems like it seems like you got good at using your powers for evil. It's very good. So tell me about the next steps of the journey. So now you realize that like you can fool people into thinking whatever, you're bending spoons or reading minds, or that you can move metal or anything like that. What took you to, some of the biggest stages? How did you start that transition?
Well, I mean, I lost all that power my senior year in high school when I did the talent show, because that really showed people my level of magic prowess, and it went so horribly wrong. I did 6 tricks, and all 6 tricks went wrong, starting from trick 1 all the way down the line. I exposed the Super X levitation. I had the blanket where you pull the supports out from the table and she floats down. But you get your leg behind the metal bar, so they can't see the metal bar. Then you lift up the blanket and they see your legs and they figure that the table's floating. Well, they saw the metal bar the whole time because she was laying on the blanket. It was always up. The blanket was always up. So the whole time I'm walking around, they could see the metal bar. That was one trick. I killed my dove.
Oh my goodness.
It got out of the pouch. I was going to produce a dove, and it got out of the pouch and started running. So I chased it, and it stopped, and I ran over it, squashed it flat. The girl that was in the sword cabinet was telling me she had a leg cramp, and she had to get out now. Even though the swords were only halfway through, being put into box, she stood up and knocked the box apart from a leg cramp. It was horrible. The gloves to dove didn't work. The vanishing cane snagged halfway, so I had half a cane and half a silk in one hand, and it was just horrid. So after that show, I swore I would never do magic again ever, and from that point on, I never did another serious magic trick.
And all of that excitement that you built about your mind metal bending abilities, that was all gone?
It was gone. It was all gone. My parents were in the audience. My schoolmates were in the audience. My relatives were in the audience. There wasn't anybody who didn't see me bomb. And it was so bad that the next day nobody even mentioned it. Usually the kids in school are cruel, and they'll tease you about it. But they didn't say a word. It was just like, don't say anything to them.
Brutal. So you swore off real magic, or real fake magic, or whatever this is.
I never did it. I never wanted to be another, Copperfield or Henning again. That was my goal.
It reminds me of there was an interview with Steve Martin, and he said that like he was doing magic and people thought it was funnier when the tricks didn't work than when they did. And I think about that when I watch some of your performing, because like sometimes the tricks don't end up working or being about anything, you know what I mean, or end up coming together in a magical way, but like that's the point, and it's almost funnier that way, right? It's more
yeah. Well, there's two ways I would write. One is to take a trick and screw it up, and one is to take the apparatus that is involved in a trick and make my own trick up,
Right.
So that's the 2 ways of writing it. I would just go to the castle and sit in the audience and go, hey, what would happen if this happened?
Right. You just look at a standard trick and you say like, what happened if it didn't work? Or
I saw a guy do a card stab, and he couldn't for the life of him stab the right card, and then he was stabbing groups of cards pretty soon. And I thought that was hilarious. Just hopefully that one of the cards in the group that was stuck to his knife would be the card. Then I went to San Francisco and started street performing, thinking that I would never do magic again, but I was forced into doing it again because I needed money. West, we were taking a vacation, and friends of ours dropped us off. We got in a fight, and he dropped us off we were all in a van, and I had to do magic again on the streets to get money to eat. So I started to do magic again, but funny magic. That's when I bumped into Harry Anderson, and Harry was out there doing his stuff, and a couple other magicians. A. Whitney Brown was a good magician, comic. So they took me under their wing and showed me how to do it right, how to do magic and comedy together.
What are some of the things that are so hard to deal with, and maybe what are some of the strategies that you use to deal with it?
The people on the streets aren't there to see you. They've made that quite clear to me. So halfway through a show, they would walk away. If you weren't good enough to keep their attention, they would continue to shop. And I was on Fisherman's Wharf, so they would just walk away halfway through my show, and I'd have to start over again and try again. And then I saw Harry do his show. Harry was a bit of an asshole to him. He packed my equipment up. I went off to get a sandwich real quick, and he had packed my table and all my gear up, and was doing a show in my spot. And he had maybe 150 people standing there watching him, whereas I would have about 30. And at first I was going to kick his ass until I saw the crowd building, and then he just did an amazing show. And then from that point on, he pretty much was my hero. And, he wouldn't even talk to me at first. He just wanted to teach me a lesson on, hey, kid, anywhere I want to work on the street, it's my spot, not yours. And he was just leaving as I was coming onto the streets. He had gotten Cheers, a gig on Cheers, and he was just out there to make a few bucks. But, by watching him over and over and over again, and basically stealing some of his mannerisms, I learned how to do it. I learned timing, and then I lived in fear of him coming back on the street and seeing me doing a couple of his lines. So I had to drop those from my act, and I started doing all original stuff by Robert Orban. And you know who Robert Orban is?
I don't.
He's a guy who used to write comedy for magicians and jugglers, and he would write variety act jokes and put them in these little soft cover books, and you could order them from magic shops. They were pretty horrible jokes, but the formula was there.
Right.
And I would take the formula from those jokes. I learned how to write comedy with the help of some of the street performers, and I got really good at writing comedy of my own, making my stuff original. And then adding the blood capsule, of course, to the razor blade trick, because I was doing razor blades on the street. When I added the blood capsule, I would say it's then that I found my style. That's what I wanted. I wanted that. I love shocking people.
And that, like, on the street energy, like you said, you have to have kind of something every second, because otherwise someone's going to walk away.
That's right.
What kind of strategies would you use, or could somebody use on the street?
Well, my strategy was that there was a water shortage, a really severe water shortage. And I would have 6 or 7 buckets of water, and I would tell the audience that I was going to pour them out unless they stopped. Because the joke, I'd start pouring buckets of water out. People were like, "Oh, what is he doing?" Or I actually grab a kid in a headlock, somebody's kid, and put a knife up to his head and say, "If you don't stop, I'll kill the kid." I would do anything. I would have my car parked at the curb, and I had a guy pop out of the trunk and scare the shit out of everybody, and they would stop, to watch other people get scared, and then that would form a crowd, and then I would start my But razor blades in the blood on the street really set me apart. I mean, really, when you're starting to eat razor blades and you're chewing them up in pieces and you start bleeding, that stopped them. That stopped them. And then I got good. The show got decent. I was doing short shows, like 15-minute, 20-minute shows, and using good comedy props. And the better I got, the more people stopped. And after a while, there was, like Harry used to get 100 people out there, and I couldn't keep them off the street. And because of that,
right,
I kept getting arrested. All the time. The cops would just sit there and wait for the crowd to go out into the street, and I would try to bring them in, but they would swell out, and I would be in jail all weekend. They'd put me in jail. So it got to be where I was in jail more than I wasn't. I had to find a different approach to doing my show, and that was moving it indoors, finding a comedy club that would be willing to take a rough around the edges street performer, but it was easy going into a comedy club because I already had a great act.
Right.
If you can kill on the street, you can destroy the comedy club.
Right. Because I imagine everyone else in a comedy club is trying out their jokes and like testing out, and you're like, every minute that you're keeping people entertained, so they don't even walk away.
Right, and there wasn't a lot of prop comics back then at that time, so it was me and maybe two other people, and my props were good. I was see, this is the thing that's funny to me is that people come down on Carrot Top for doing props, and he has a bad thing he has to get over from a lot of stand-ups giving him a bad rap, but he's actually brilliant. But I never had to deal with that because they thought I was, one, a magician doing comedy, or they just thought I was a parody of a prop comic.
Right.
But I wasn't really. I was a prop comic. They let me slide. I'm grateful for them for seeing it that way. But I was really doing what Carrot Top was doing. But
it was kind of like magic themed.
Yeah, magic themed, prop themed. So I got the respect of the other comedians. I didn't have to deal with that. Them dancing around me in a circle, going ha ha.
What was your view? I know we touched on this a little bit already, but what was your view about doing magic versus magic being the butt end of the joke? What's your feeling on, was comedy more fun to do than to do magic? Like what's your feeling on not really having, you're not really worrying about serious magic punchlines or anything, and really just using it for kind of like the topic of magic?
I told you what happened when I tried to do real magic. I mean, I would kill doves and things would go wrong, a lot of times things would go wrong. It's not that I couldn't do magic. It's that I couldn't do it consistently.
Right.
And there was a way for it to goof up, it would. So when I did comedy, when I started to learn how to write comedy and stuff, I liked the comics that were out there working. I liked to hang out with them. They were fun to hang around, and by hanging out with funnier people, I was becoming funnier myself, and I did my homework on it. I really enjoyed watching comedy movies, and I would study Chaplin, and I would study Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton. People would take me to see these silent movies that they had on the beach, and I would just watch them and learn from Chaplin's movements and how to do physical faces and physical comedy. And I had already learned about magic. So I've gone through that route. So learning about comedy was great. Watching A. Whitney Brown, who's a comedian, who used to be on Saturday Night Live, he was on the street with a dog act, and he said, "Come over and watch Richard Pryor's very first concert video, and you'll learn everything you need to know." That was the Bible for a lot of stand-ups back then, his first concert. So I watched Richard Pryor concert, and I started learning how to write really clever comedy, really edgy stuff. I liked edgy stuff, Had an easier time writing comedy than I did learning magic, having it work consistently.
Right. How did you, first of all, what advice would you have? I know you mentioned a whole bunch of different people that were sort of your inspiration and maybe your lessons. Is there someone, maybe a book or resource or a person or something like that you would recommend for somebody who is trying to figure out how to write comedy? I know that magicians don't tend to have a lot of training writing comedy.
Yeah, I have good advice for it. First of all, hang out with funny people. So maybe some of them are not funny, they're just sarcastic, in a funny way. Those are the best people. People that are sarcastic about everything. You start hanging out with comics like I did, and it's you might not be as funny as they are at first, but trust me, in a course of months or years, you'll pick it up, or you'll be the butt of the joke if you don't. So you'll get to learn how to do comedy from just hanging out. It got to be where I found myself hanging out with Robin Williams every night, and members of Monty Python who are like as quick as you can possibly be. John Cleese, Eric Idle. I could hold my own with those people. Not only after a while could I hold my own with them, but I was as funny as they were in normal conversation. They considered me to be really, really funny, but that takes years to do. So in the beginning, you got to learn how to write comedy, and that's skewing the way you see things. Like I said, you go to the castle, you watch a magician with the intent of what happens if he screws up. the books, the joke books that you get at the library or at the store. You can order 101 insults. That's the kind of stuff that is not really good. Every 5 pages, you'll have one good joke, but you can at least get the formula from the other jokes and maybe learn how to twist those around to be funny. The seed is there. You just got to plant it and hope that you can tell it's a tree when it grows in, you know. You've got to just start looking at things funny and hanging out with funny people, running them by people.
It's good to know that, the secret is to just surround yourself with more of the right people and to continue to learn from the best. What did
Keep your eyes open.
Yeah. And I really like the lens of looking at things that you already know with, like, what would this look like if it was stupid or broken or bad or extra wrong or whatever, surprising or whatever that is.
Steve Martin's a great one to watch for that.
Yeah, he does twist. He twists things very well.
Yeah, he's a good. The jokes are short and they're twisted, and they're not that hard to write. And in fact, the more ridiculous it might seem to you, the audience might like it. You know, so everything that I think is really, really funny sometimes isn't. But it gets big laughs. It gets big laughs when I tell people about it, and they say, "Oh, that's going to be great." But to me, the red flag comes up when that happens, because with my luck, it's generally not the funniest joke,
right.
You know. But sometimes it is. But most of the time, if everyone's laughing really hard at it, it's not going to work. You know. But that's just me.
Did you have a system or a strategy to add new material, or were you just, I guess at some points performing enough that, adding 1 minute or one bit every night or testing 1 minute or one bit that it just eases it's all self in?
No, let me tell you something. The way to write is to sit down in front of a computer and just stare at that blank page if you have to, but to sit down for an hour every day and look at that paper, and out of boredom, you'll start to write something. That's one way of writing. The other way is walking around Home Depot and looking at stuff, looking at props, materials, and going, oh, that would be funny. Another way is to listen when you're talking with other people and they come up with an idea and you expound on it, come up with there's a lot of people who are triggers for good. I hang out with people who aren't necessarily funny, but they'll trigger something funny in
right.
something they say, and I'll add to it and make it a good joke, So, and sometimes it'll happen during your show. It'll just pop into your head. That's the weirdest way, because it's like you're not even trying to think of anything funny, and all of a sudden you have this beautiful joke in your head that was like a gift from God. You have a vessel in your head that catches these things. You don't know where they come from or how they came there. It's just trained to come and pop in your head. That comes after a while, there's 100 different ways to do it, and one of those ways will work for you,
One of the discussions that I've had on this podcast before is the difference between a show and an act. A show being an hour-long thing, plus or minus, and an act being, a tight 15 minutes, or maybe even something like 5 minutes. How long did you have an act before you had a show?
That's a great question. Here's the deal. I used to volunteer from the audience from day one. I always would get somebody up and on the streets or in the nightclubs, and I would he thinks he's going to be up there for 5 minutes. He's up there for 40 minutes, generally.
Right.
And that got to be a real trap for me, because when it came time for me to do TV and have a 6-minute routine, I really didn't have a 6-minute routine that I could chop out from this block. I made the block so tight, and so, this happens, that it was hard for me to take 6 minutes out. So I had to really work hard to do TV by myself without a volunteer and to keep it funny. So when you're writing comedy, you should be writing in 6-minute chunks. Don't write out a whole 20-minute routine, I mean, you can, but make sure that you can write out a 6-minute block of material too, because those are the ones that really mean the most. When you go to do auditions, they don't want a show. They want a set. And Letterman, I had a hardest time with coming up with 6 minutes for my act. That was a real trap. That whole audience member thing was a trap for me. So it's good. You have to have both, but don't write so tight that it's a story and you can't break that story up.
Yeah, a lot of people right now, a lot of early magicians who are getting to the stage or, putting on interesting shows is very popular. Magicians think in terms of their hour-long show. I don't know, I've been a full-time magician for a long time, and I rarely get the opportunity to do hour-long shows as much as I do to do 15-minute spots or even 30-minute spots or, things that aren't necessarily...
It's like buying a tuxedo. It's nice to have, but when are you going to use it?
Right.
But how often are you going to use it?
Right.
Yeah, you're right. You got to have. I mean, it's fun to sit and visualize your whole hour show. I mean, you should be doing that too. I used to put on a good record, Radiohead or Led Zeppelin. So I used to sit in the dark and just rock back and forth with a pencil paper and visualize my whole hour show. That's the way to do it, is to sit in the dark and just concentrate on listening to good music, nothing that's going to take your mind off of your thinking, and try to visualize your hour. It's good to visualize the production value that you're going to put in your show. Lights that you might not even be able to afford now, but when it came time to build my show, my hour show, I pretty much had a great idea of what was going to go in it. And, most of it worked from just visualizing, but to have an hour show, that's different than with 6 minutes TV sets. It took me probably, before I got an hour special on television, I probably was in the business for 20 years before they gave me my first hour. Comedy Central gave me a 5 minute, they gave me a 10 minute, they gave me another 5 minutes, then they gave me a half hour, and then they dropped me for 10 years and came back to me and said, after 10 years, do you want to do an hour set? And I'm like, I didn't even know you guys still knew who I was. So then, that was a 20-year period. I had to write a whole new hour of material in less than a year. That was not easy to do, trust me.
I almost want to ask, there seems like between a lot of turning points, like going from the stage to a comedy club and then from a comedy club to television, there's a lot of turning points where you have to change a lot of what you do, maybe add a lot, maybe. Is there something that you use to keep yourself grounded in your material? Or do you lean back on maybe your character or the structure of a joke to feel confident in making new material or splicing stuff together?
For me, I didn't do that because, first of all, when they say rely on your character, it was really hard for me to separate my character from me, even though I know that I am a character on stage, that I'm not off stage. I never really sat and tried to define my character, which is something you should do. And I relied on the press and other people to define my character. When I would read a review, it would say this sophomoric act, this abrasive guy was funny, and I would take those words, abrasive. I didn't know I was abrasive. I guess I am abrasive if everybody's calling me that. Or sophomoric. I didn't know. I thought my stuff was, I didn't know it was so immature, but it is. It's the most immature. So I would take those. Those words from critics, and I figured out my character pretty much over the years. But I never. It's easier if you know your character to begin with, because then you can pick and choose your material that works or not. I would put something in that I thought was funny, and I would just try to make it funny, even though it didn't fit my character, and then eventually give up on it. Why isn't this working? Well, because it's not something your character would do.
How often in the ringing in of new material would you hit the post? How good did you get it saying, you know what, this is going to be funny? Or is it basically always a crapshoot,
Well, it's always a crapshoot, but it tends to be there's a lot of crap when you get good at it. There's a lot of crap to shoot at when you
Right.
There's certain rules for me. Like if I had to build something and it was an extensive build, I knew it wasn't going to work. My stuff the stuff had to look shitty. It had to look like it was just bought at Target, and nothing fancy, and it couldn't be long. It had to be short. So I knew by doing that it would work, and I'd say that with a matter of time, what you put in your show gets easier and easier and easier to put in without having bad shit fall in there with it. Another thing is, there's a rule where if it's so bad then keep it in, because you can actually torture the audience with this piece that's so bad to the point where it's funny, if that makes sense. I used to have a bit that was so bad that I'd pull it out every 10 minutes and just do it again. and then I'd drive it into the ground so hard. Like, have we done this
awesome.
yet? Yeah, it's a good formula. There's a lot of really good formulas. Here's another good formula. If you're thinking about writing comedy, to put something down and say, we'll come back to this in a second. If you take what you said literally and put that object down and just step away for a second away from that object, and then step right back towards it and pick it up and continue with it, that's funny. I mean, like, just to say, we're going to put this down for a second. They're thinking, well, you're going to put it down for a minute or two, and you put it down for a second and do everything literally, and it really is a great formula for writing a joke. You can use it a million ways. Like, here's something you haven't seen before, and you pull out something that they haven't seen before, whether it's 100 balloons tied to a stick with bells on it,
right?
Or I used to use, here's an ordinary deck of cards, and then I pull it out. There's nothing ordinary about it. There's flags on it, there's pinwheels on it, there's dolls tied to it hanging, and then you put it away. And it's quick throwaway bits like that. Like, have we done this before? No. But we'll do it now then, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What you say literally.
That's great. Do you have any other formulas like that you figured out for people to use, or ones that you have on the top of your head, obviously?
All of them. I have all the formulas. Let me think. There's a good formula. You know who Rich Block is? There's a formula where he does something really important, and right before the most important thing, he'll get sidetracked and go off into a whole nother trick. That's a great formula. He's just about to reveal something really, really important. And oh, by the way, I never get to it. That's a great formula. There's a formula where you do something that you're supposed to, like, drop a cannonball through a piece of glass or something, and then it smashes into 1,000 pieces, and you don't say a word. You just stare at it. And then you deliver your line something like, "Fuck." That's all you have to do.
Right.
I gave that to Milt Larson. Milt Larson never swore ever in his act, and he dropped a cannonball through a piece of glass and just stood there looking at it. And then he would go on. I said, "Milt, I know you don't use the word fuck, but that's why this is going to be funny."
Right.
Just stare at it. Give it your long stare. Take your time with it, and then just say, mumble under your breath, "Fuck." And when he did, it just destroyed, and he never stopped thanking me after that. Well, he brings it up every time I see him. There's certain formulas like that where the timing is where you just pause and look at the trick. Something doesn't work, you walk across the stage and you rip a piece of paper up and you come back and continue your show. That's a funny one. You just rip a piece of paper out of a notebook and crumble it up and then walk. But you got to make that long walk,
Right.
The walk of shame.
Oh, that's good.
There's a million formulas like that, and those are the ones that you get watching comedy tapes. I used to watch Jack Benny. Jack Benny had a bit where he would ask for his violin, and nobody would bring it out. Then he'd ask again, "Can you please bring out my violin?" And somebody would literally throw it out from the wings, and it would smash by his feet. And he would say, there was a long pause, and he would say, "Obviously not a fan," which I turned into a total trick. I said, "Can you bring out my deck of cards?" And my assistant would throw them completely at me, the deck of cards. And I go, she used to bring them out on a tray when she was professional. And then you wait a few beats, and then the tray comes flying out. Right.
Or when you ask for the lights, can I get the lights down?
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah, those are the things that make a great comedy show, is those little vignettes, and you can think of millions of those. Robert Orban books have a million of those.
That's great.
Like the guy's going to come and sweep the stage off, but he doesn't. He just throws you out a broom or something,
In a lot of what you did, you did a lot of pushing of the envelope with bringing spectators up on stage. You know, you made them drink weird stuff and do strange things, and you just mess with them from, you know, oftentimes from the moment they stepped on stage all the way till they left. Do you think that that kind of thing is still possible? Do you think that that was of the time? Like, could someone still do what you were doing in 2019 who isn't you? Or do you think, you know, that was part of, I don't know, maybe the times, maybe...
No, not at all. Nothing to do with the times at all. They, you know, people would always say to me, "Oh man, you just fucking brutalized that guy up there, and you put him through the ringer." Yeah, okay, I did, but he was more than happy to go
Right.
through that ringer and be brutalized, and that's one ringer he'll never forget.
Right.
He'll come up to me 20 years later and tell me, "Hey, I was on stage with you. That's the best time I ever had in my life." Because you're making that guy a star.
Right.
At the end, he's bowing up there with you. You make him look good in the end, you know. Only thing that makes him look bad is his incooperation and being an asshole. That's what makes him look bad. If he stays with me down that path all the way to the end, he looks stellar, you know. So I'm not really torturing
Like, no matter what you put him through, like...
Yeah, I don't put him through anything that's going to really embarrass him that badly. I mean, nothing. I mean, he has to go through the motions, but he doesn't get wet. He doesn't get, I don't hurt his ego. I make him look good, you know. That's the trick to bringing a volunteer. You can keep him up as long as you want when you do that. He has a good time. It was, in the beginning, he would sit down, and that's when I would give him shit. Because, I mean, when somebody sits down on you after you've invested 20 minutes of time with them, that makes you look bad. It's your turn to make him look bad. You know, when he did that, I would go, "You're a pussy. You know, what a pussy." If you don't sit the guy down right away, if he's an asshole right away, you got to sit him down because you don't want to be up there for 20 minutes. So you pick a certain type, and I can tell you that the type you don't pick is somebody that wears a Hawaiian shirt. You don't want them.
What's wrong with people that wear Hawaiian shirts?
Just figure it out. Guess. They're annoying. They're annoying people. Why would you wear a Hawaiian shirt otherwise to stand out and be annoying? Or if he wears a shirt with cocktail drinks on it, it's even worse. Now, there's some shirts that look Hawaiian shirts. Look carefully. Are they flowers or are they drinks, Mai Tais and whatnot? That is really bad. You know, you don't want to pick somebody too old and look disrespectful. You don't want to pick a woman because that looks like you're a bully. You want to pick somebody too young because it doesn't look good. You want to pick a middle-aged guy who looks straight, who doesn't, you know, who's not a smart ass. And you could tell if he's a smart ass simply by asking his name. If he says Bob and everyone at his table laughs, you know his name isn't Bob and you're going to have a hard time getting straight. So you look for certain things. I know what to look for, you know. Sometimes I'm wrong and I have to deal with an asshole. But even then, during my Vegas show, I would have an alarm go off right in the beginning when he came up. If he was an asshole, I would have sirens go off, and I've had somebody with a hard hat come take him off stage and say, "Sorry, dude, you set off the asshole alert." You know, if it was up to me, you could stay, but you set off the asshole alert, and they would sit him back down, you know, which the audience loved, and that way I got another chance to pick somebody who's going to work good.
Before we talk a little bit about what it was like doing the show in Vegas, you know, we were talking about some of the other places where you learned your craft, and I know that you had to perform at a strip club for a while and kind of learned how to get sharper by doing that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, your worst situations are your best situations at first. When you're booked to play something like that, a comedy club up in Alaska where everybody's roughnecks, or any strip club, or an event where they're not really there to see you, a group of bankers who are stuffy. These are some of the worst audiences you can get. You need to realize that they might seem like it's a horror show at the time, but those are the ones that really teach you the most how to perform. And when you can get them on your side, then you can get anybody on your side. Or if you don't get them on your side, you're not going to be the all well-rounded performer that you think you're going to be. So stick to good places if you can, you know. But so I learned everything from working in a strip club. I lived in a trailer in the parking lot of the strip club. It was during the pipeline days. People would be carrying guns on their sidearms, and everybody was doing cocaine and it was the Wild Wild West, you know. My introduction on stage was, "Hey, does everybody want to see some titties?" And they would go, "Yeah." Well, first here's a magician, you know. So they'd throw me out to the fucking wolves. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. People were bullying me. People wanted to see the girls, and so I had to figure out a way for them to like me. And I wrote back home to A. Whitney Brown, a comic, and told him, "Hey, I'm dying up here. You need to send me every insult book that you can possibly find." So I spent the next month memorizing 200 insults. Some of them were written on pieces of paper on the back of my table, and some of them in my memory. But whenever somebody would yell something at me, I would yell something funny back at them. And I got to the point where I could shut people up because they were tired of me getting the best of them. And then I would do my little magic trick and bring out the titties. And they got to be where they were just as happy to see me come out as they were to see the girls. So, I mean, it took three years for me to learn how to have an answer for everything. But they were memorized answers. And then I got to be writing my own insult lines, you know, make them towards the situation more. I was fucking quick draw, man. Nobody could say anything to me without me having a comeback. And from that, going to the States, back to the States and into a club, nobody wanted to fuck with me ever.
Right, you become sharp.
Yeah, I suddenly, all of a sudden I had wit, you know.
So what's your feeling on going collecting 200 lines from other sources without creating them to use them for a year until you create your own? Like, is that just how it goes, or is there a better way to do that? Like, you know, in magic, people are always talking about taking or borrowing material, things like, is there a right way to learn through someone else's material?
Yeah, there is. And if you're getting an insult book and you're writing them down, and that's fair game. If the book is made for that. Somebody puts a collection of insults together. It's not because it's not meant to be made. It's meant to be used. Those are legal property of anybody who buys that book. But you can change the line, custom make the line, and you can learn by the line by taking the words and maybe it's a joke that needs modifying. Maybe it's about Abraham Lincoln. You can modify it to a situation that's current. But you can use the jokes from the book, sure. What you can't do is you can't use somebody's custom-made heckler line that they wrote, even though it sounds like it could have come from a book, because that's my problem. Everyone's stealing from me because they say it sounds like it comes from a book, and I always get, "Oh, that's really old," and I'm like, "Dude,
you're like, it's
I'm
me.
really old."
Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote that 40 years ago, you know, and my wife is a Nazi, so she'll stop anyone using my material. If I show my wife the source of the joke and tell her how I wrote it, she turns into a Nazi and she goes after that person. And that person will always stop using the line because she'll ruin their careers, you know, which is good.
You must see it constantly.
I see it all the time.
I have to tell you that the deeper I dug into watching your material, the more I realized that people close to me whose material I thought was original comedy magic was just yours.
Well, now don't get confused, because I do use a lot of old lines in my act from the books that are okay to use. But I can tell you which ones, you know, like the Bic lighter gag. Everybody wants to do the Bic lighter gag. That's mine. Even willing to switch it around to think it's a different bit, like Murray, who use it with shoes for some reason. Somebody have a pair of shoes, or that just about fills the shoe rack up. Well, I don't know what the fuck he's thinking, but that's mine. That's not changing it around. It's people think that they're either complimenting you or paying you a tribute, which is another way of stealing the joke. You know, in Europe and in other countries, I've had to come down on people who are doing my complete show and having to threaten to sue them. And some of them are scared by that, some of them aren't. But one way or another, I'll stop them from doing it, because unless I sell it to them, like Chris Angel, people go, "Chris Angel's doing a lot of your material." Well, yeah, well,
He
Chris
bought
Angel
it.
bought my material. Yeah,
Right.
and I'm willing to sell a lot of great material because I'm not working anymore, and I have hours and hours of material. You know, if you want material, don't steal it from me. Just come buy it from me, and you got the blessing to do it. But yeah, you have to watch. You have to watch that. But some of the stuff, like I said, some of the stuff seems like it's mine, but it's not mine.
Right.
And I'll be the first to admit that.
It's really interesting because we look at all of these different formats. You think about performing on the streets, performing at comedy clubs, performing at strip clubs, and then you started to perform, your hour-long show in Vegas. And that kind of sounds, from everything that I've heard, like that was the Amazing Jonathan's playground, basically, for you to do anything and everything ridiculous that you could think of in your show and live a ridiculously fun life. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to put on your show there and what kind of things you made sure to have part of the show to be a Vegas level show?
I love your questions. I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. Take the time and ask the right questions. Yeah, when I used to do Vegas before I did Vegas. I used to come here for 2 weeks, play the Sahara, then I'd get hell over for another 2 weeks, and then on and off I was there half the year. So that was great. I loved it. That's when I started realizing that I had a big draw coming off of the Comedy Central special. I was doing really well for the Sahara. Then I got divorced. My wife left. She was my assistant, and it really killed me. It was pretty much the crusher, and I didn't feel funny anymore, so I wanted to stop doing the show altogether. So I went and honored some road dates that I had with the intention of stopping because I was sick of traveling, 30 years of it. Then my manager called and said, "Do you want to play full-time in Vegas?" I always had wanted to play full-time, and I said, "Well, I'm not really funny anymore." And he said, "Just try it. David Brenner's at the Gold Nugget. He wants to take a 2-week vacation. I want to see if you like this room. It's downtown. It's not on the Strip," which kind of sucked. And I said, "Okay, I'll do 2 weeks," and that's it. So I went and did 2 weeks, and they put me in this beautiful suite. And we sold out every single night, which is pretty unheard of back then because downtown was dead. All the shows have moved to the Strip. And the only shows downtown were these cheap, hacky shows. David Brenner was trying to make a go of it, and he was having a miserable time. So I sold out every night at the Gold Nugget, 500 seats. And I couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe it. Nobody could. It was just the timing was right. And so they offered me a full-time spot. After 2 weeks, I got my paycheck, and it was something like $65,000 for 2 weeks. And I said, "Wow, fucking hell." So I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." So what they created a spot for me at 10 o'clock. David would go on at 8, I'd go on at 10, and they gave me a 6-month contract. They upped my suite to this Frank Sinatra suite, which is the double-level suite, and I had signing privileges. I didn't have to pay for anything. I could sign for any meal, whether it was me or 5 other people. There was no money spent. I could just sign for everything, and they treated me like a king because I was any casino that you bring business to, they kiss your ass. Brenner, they not so much. Brenner was just barely bringing in like 30, 40 people, and we were selling 500 seats a night, which they were amazed by. All the word on the Strip was, "Hey, here's this kid. He's selling out every night downtown." So they all started to come see me, and stars started coming. George Carlin would come see me. Martin Lawrence would come see me. Kevin Spacey was here. All the stars who came through Vegas, they heard about it, word of mouth, and they came, saw the show. So I started building the show bigger and bigger, putting more production value into it because I didn't have to move around. That was the key, is that I wasn't packing things up every night. I could leave my stuff. And we were building some really elaborate, funny stuff.
Can you give me some examples of some of those things?
Sure. I would have Tanya, my assistant. She would hold a sheet up. I would stick a microphone in her mouth, and she would go under the sheet, and you could see a skeleton under the sheet lighting up. She's getting electrocuted. And smoke was coming out from under the sheet. And I would pull the sheet away, and she was gone, and she was in the back of the room with a whistle, like magicians do. But it was just one of the stagehands dressed like her. And she would come running forward. It's obviously a guy. And he would come running forward and take a bow, stuff like that. We would have special Halloween shows there that we used monsters, and people would run around the audience scaring the shit out of people. We put video effects in. We scanned the crowd and put people's faces up on the screen and typed our own letters over them. The audience loved before the show even started, we would type in something like, has fresh breath to the girl, and there was a guy and said, hung like a Tic Tac. So we made up all these funny little things, and they loved the show, and it just grew and grew, and they kept holding us over and over, and it got to be a year. We were there a year, and they gave me a substantial raise to $80,000 a week. So I was making $80,000 a week for a year and a half, and I was living off the money I made on my T-shirts. I was pulling a couple grand in a night on T-shirt sales. So that was like close to $3 million a year, $2.5 million a year I would get, It was the best time I've ever had in my life. I had 2 homes. I had a big house in L.A. I have a big mansion here, and I would fly back and forth between the 2 every weekend. I had a limousine that took me back. It was just like a really heady time for me. And then the Flamingo came along, and they offered me a better deal. The Flamingo lured me away from the Gold Nugget and said, we will give you $80,000 a week, which is what you're making now. And you don't have to have any expenses on advertising. I was spending about $30,000 a month on advertising. They were going to pay for all that. So I took a big jump and paid for the 3rd year I was there and worked at the Flamingo. And the Gold Nugget hated me when I left because I was their, I was their golden boy. So they started to badmouth me because I left. They started to try to say I left because I was hard to work with, and just trying to, that's what casinos do. And at the same time they were doing that, they were making offers to get me back by outbidding the Gold Nugget or the Flamingo. So at the end of my Flamingo run, they lured me back to the Golden Nugget with a $4 million a year deal. As soon as I said yes and went to start to work there, they sold the casino. MGM Grand sold it to private owners. Private owners didn't want to pay me $4,000 because they didn't see the business I could bring in, and they locked me out. They tried to get my contract invalid, and the way they did that was by sabotaging my box office. People would call in, they would tell people I was sold out, even though I wasn't. They would, Tony Orlando called to get tickets once, and they told him that I was sold out. And they also told him, you don't want to see this show. So they were using, dirty politics, which a casino will do. Casinos are so, I could tell you some horror stories about casinos, what they did to me. And so they did it. They made it so that my audience dropped to about 200 a night instead of 500. Then they had reason to let me go, and they let me go. And I lost my $4 million contract. And I went to the Riviera after that and opened there and did another 13 years. But the Gold Nugget did its damage, not just to me, but Tony Orlando, and they did it to everybody. Then the Sahara fucked me over by putting cameras in my dressing room and watching the girls get changed. Yeah, the newspaper came up to me and said, do you know that there's cameras in your dressing room? And I'm like, no. And they said, yeah, the guys that installed them just came forward. You've had cameras in your dressing room for the last year. And they've been watching the girls up in the security booth like it was a reality show, getting changed and you fucking your girlfriend and all kinds of shit that they saw. So we sued them and we won. And we all quit after that. We were told by the lawyer to quit and sue them. So we did. And they had to pay us. So that was my end of casinos. I didn't want to work in a casino after all this shit anymore. So we went to work for, our last place was Planet Hollywood's, that was not attached to the casino. actually a gay club. Before it was a gay club, we opened our show there at 8, and then they were a gay club at midnight. So we had a good theater, and they weren't attached to any of these fuckwits, you know.
Yeah. It sounds like an incredible time, but you know what it's like working with the Devils, I guess.
Yeah, but that was just a small faction. We had a great time most of the time. We had so much fun working. I had a great crew that stayed with me for those entire 13 years, you know.
Do you have any secrets or any things that you started to think about in building that show that were different than when you were building an act or working for TV? Any different strategies for making that show memorable or interactive or high production value?
Yeah, that's right. I made it a high production value. I had a cast of people that would come and help me with this. Instead of me and somebody else on the road, it was me and 6 other people putting skits together, you know, so I could have a cast of characters. And we had a black guy that joined the show, and we did a lot of funny black jokes, which were politically incorrect, but I'd still be doing them to this day. I don't give a fuck. But the thing that made my show towards the end be what it was the fact that it was politically incorrect, and that I didn't give a fuck about that. We were doing KKK jokes our last 2 years, so you know people like that. There's still a lot of people who don't care about being politically correct. They just want to see funny, and that's what we did. We catered to the impolitically correct.
It's funny because you know you think like there are people that obviously that's what they want to see, you know, like that's what they're coming out to see.
Yeah, that was a part of our drawing power, definitely.
It is intentionally like the commentary on real magic by there being this joke about magic, I don't care what I say, magic in Vegas is very funny, you know, like I'm sure you felt that juxtaposition.
Well, you know, the thing about Vegas is people that play here, generally people outside of Vegas don't know who the fuck they are. Like the big stars here, at that time, Danny Gans, nobody knew who Danny Gans was. Nobody really knows who Siegfried and Roy are. Nobody really knows who Anthony Cools is. Nobody knows the big acts that are out here. They're big in Vegas, and once you leave the city lines, they're not big at all. See, Penn and Teller are big everywhere. You know, I had a following everywhere. I had been on TV for 20 years, so I already had a following from Comedy Central. That's why we were able to survive the recession more or less. You know, we took a hit in business, but we still could bring in a couple hundred people, and everybody else was having problem bringing in 60 people at that time, and they still are. You know, they still are having a hard time bringing in people without papering the room. We didn't paper the room back then. I didn't use ticket brokers ever. And I kept my ticket price high because I wanted people to have that public perception of me being worth what Cirque du Soleil was worth. And by keeping the price high, they did have that perception. I mean, they still paid it, and they were getting more laughs, and they were walking away happier than if they saw Cirque du Soleil. So why not charge that much?
Were you ever surprised by the fandom or the following, or like was it all gradual, or did you ever find yourself in moments of being like, well, this is just crazy? Or even now, I don't know, like is it settled in? There's people around the world that like, I don't know, dress like you or have posters in their room of you
or tattoos on their arms,
yeah, on their back or
yeah
whatever.
Yeah. You know, it's always a surprise. I've been in the business for a long, long time. I've been doing this 35 years, 40, maybe 40 years. And that means there's 3 generations of people who know me. You know, the father's kids know who I am. So I get every day. I've been watching you since I was a little kid. That's all I get now. So it bugged you at first, but then why should it bug you? It's just that you have longevity. So yeah, right now it goes through waves. When I played in Vegas and off the Comedy Central special, everybody knew who I was basically because of something I did. And this is good advice to people who are in the business. If you ever get a TV special and it's like 25 minutes or 20 minutes long, no sign behind you with your name on it. I had a theater marquee with my name on it behind me on my Comedy Central special. And that is the difference between people knowing you, who you are, and knowing your name. By staring at that sign, the whole special, they knew, hey, you're the Amazing Johnathan. It used to be, hey, you're that guy with the headband that does magic. Now they know your name, just from that little simple trick. Very crucial.
How early on did you use the Amazing Johnathan name?
We're almost right from the start.
Right from the start?
Yeah, right from the streets. Right from the streets. Before that, I was in Michigan. When I was doing it in Detroit, I was a bunch of different names, but that was it. It served its purpose.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? It's amazing now. I mean, you play Vegas, people know who you are, but you're not traveling and touring or on TV anymore. So people outside of Vegas start to forget. And when I stopped doing Vegas and started going on the road, then I thought I would be selling out comedy clubs hand over fist, like I was
people
before.
Forgot because you were in Vegas for 20 years, or
that's right. That age group forgot. That age group of people going to comedy shows now and haven't been to Vegas forgot. So I mean, I was still selling 300 seats out, but these rooms are 500 seats, and they expected me to sell them out when I wasn't. So I was back to square one with trying to get name recognition, and I had to do social media, which I've never done before. I never had to do so. There wasn't even social media when I started playing Vegas. I had to learn to do that.
Well, I got to tell you, you killed it on social media. Like, you got a lot of clips that are circulating that, are like still endlessly circulating. So props to that.
Yeah, because I hired some guy to do it. I never even see that.
Well, he does a good job.
I see it. He does do a great job, and that's all I needed to do was to. Yeah, I see it when he does it, but I don't ever make one up and he finds clips that I haven't seen in years. He finds stuff, but then always something happens when something resurges to make, like I told you, 10, 15 years since the Comedy Central have approached me about doing a special. When they did, that breathed new life into my show and gave me another 10 years of popularity. And then when that started to die down, something else would come up. And now it's more than ever because of the documentary is pushed things over the top. I just, here in the golden years when I thought I could just take and relax and die, I thought, well, I'll be dead in a couple of years. Just take it easy. Now I'm fucking touring with a movie that's in theaters and a documentary that's on television. And so, it's nice to be alive to be able to see that, though. It's kind of like being at your own funeral.
I can only imagine that, in the releasing of 2 documentaries, it's brought everyone out of the woodwork that could say something to say something. So I imagine there's a lot of that. Let's use this opportunity and talk a little bit about the documentaries. I heard there was this documentary on Hulu. Someone said to me, no, wait, it's on YouTube. And then I found out there were 2 of them. So I watched the one on YouTube, then I watched the one on Hulu, and learned a whole lot. And it was crazy that in the second one you found out that there was 2 documentaries being filmed at the exact same time, and it took you for a little bit of a whirl. Can you tell us a little bit about what was that? What's going on?
Okay, so the first documentary team. Okay, now let's start from the very, very, very first. Was a lady named Nikki who wanted to do a documentary, but we got sidetracked with that project and ended up doing my video podcast called Burn Unit, which is on Apple Pods. So we got sidetracked on that one. So the documentary never happened. Then I was told I had a year to live. So I figured, okay, let's do this for real this time. And so Ben, who has experience making documentaries from Comedy Central and Comedy Bang Bang, approached me to do a documentary, and I said yes, that he could do it. And he started taping me coming to Vegas for a couple years. What direction he was, how good he was or how good he wasn't. But he wasn't showing me anything. And after 2 years, I started to get a little bit like, hey, I want to see some clips from this thing you're shooting, so I know I'm not wasting my time. I don't know how long I have. So this other documentary team approached me, and they said they had won 2 Academy Awards with their company. So I said, well, fuck, I'm not going to stand in your way. Go ahead and make this documentary. thinking that if Ben didn't come through, I would at least have this other crew that I knew made killer documentaries on point. I went back on the road after I didn't die. I was supposed to die within a year and a half. It was 3 years now, and I'm sitting around waiting for something to happen. Nothing happens. And I feel decent enough to go on the road again, so I went, fuck this, I'm going back on the road. So I set up some dates, and the two bumped into each other. Two documentary teams bumped into each other in Boston. And I went, this is going to be interesting. Let's just see what happens, How do they get out of this? They both felt that they were being intruded on, and that was funny to me. The whole thing was funny to me that they were trying to make a documentary on me, and I was teasing both of them, but mainly Ben. I won't ruin the movie, but Ben did some investigation work and found out that this other crew wasn't with this documentary award-winning team that they said they were. But what Ben doesn't say in the documentary, and this is kind of what I don't like about it, is that there really was somebody from that company producing the other guy's documentary. There was a lady called Sarah, I forgot her last name, but she was with Lightbox. Lightbox is the company that won it. So, and they had also lent them the camera gear to do it. Simon Shin, the owner, wasn't involved. That's what I got. Two documentaries, and during that process, a third documentary team, a guy, Chad Taylor, was making a documentary that completely forgot about. He had started years before, but it was just a documentary on three or four other acts, and I was in that documentary. So it wasn't just about me. None of them are just about me.
Yeah, very confusing. All these Amazing Johnathan documentaries, none of them that are really about you.
Well, they are about me, but I take the background
in
some situations. But I mean, Ben's documentary ended up being a lot about Ben and whether my illness was faked or not. I never thought that while it was being made that would be either of the issues used in that documentary.
Did you imagine in a million years that would be something that even came up, or that would be?
I was hoping that the validity of the illness would come up, because I know that a lot of people after 3 years, 4 years now, were asking, is that real, or do you just try to, is it a publicity stunt or what?
Is someone supposed to think that that's a publicity stunt? Like, is that something you think you would do? Like,
no, I would. My publicity stunt was that I was going to fake my death completely. I was going to vanish completely, not to be sick and to worry everybody. My whole plan years ago I was going to be the first one to fake his death and not come back, and then come back 10 years later or 5 years later, because that's never been done before. And I wanted to do something that's never been done before. I mean, everyone suspects Andy Kaufman and Elvis, but of course that's not true. They've never come back. But I wanted to be the first one to come back, and I thought that would be so awesome to have a film crew with you, document you planning that, faking your death. What I did would be a good foreplay for that to happen.
Right.
And then I would come back, But I met with lawyers and my management, and they said the legal repercussions to doing that would put you in jail, and it would break you. You wouldn't have a penny. So I did suss that out. No, this wasn't fake. This was a real heart condition.
Of course not.
I spent most of my time those 3 years in the hospital, and my heart rate was 12%, and the doctors told me I was going to die because I'm doing meth at the time. I'm uncontrolled diabetic, and I didn't have long to go. I couldn't walk anymore. So the doctor said, if you don't stop doing meth, you're dead within a year. I can guarantee you that's true. And if you don't get your diabetes, stop doing meth, and I didn't stop doing diabetes. Didn't start taking my diabetes. I just wanted to go like I wanted to go. If my heart's going to go, I'm going to go. I'm going to go out the way I wanted. I'm not going to buy myself an extra month or two because I stopped doing drugs. I've been doing drugs since I was 16. To stop doing them, probably the shock from that would kill my body, since I've been doing them every day for 16 years, But I just didn't feel like stopping. I didn't care if it happened. So I continued against doctor's advice, and it didn't happen. I feel fine. I feel fine. I mean, I can't walk. I'm out of a wheelchair for the first time in 2 weeks. I've been in a chair for almost 3.5 years, and I feel better and better. So Obviously, the doctor misdiagnosed what my heart can and can't do. I still can't do stairs and can't assert myself, and it's going to happen. I know that. But I'm waiting for it, and it's not coming. So, bring it on, motherfuckers.
So you're enjoying it along the way, yeah.
Yeah, I got to see the documentary finished. I never thought that. Because of that, that's why I showed me doing drugs on camera, because I wanted to be honest. I wouldn't have been around. I would be gone by that time that was showed. And people would know me for who I am, a drug addict who created an amazing show, and it didn't seem to really hurt.
Do you feel like getting that death sentence and what it did to how you felt about maybe like sharing the drugs that you did, or whatever else it did to maybe the way you thought about life and your belongings and things like that? Are you thankful that you kind of went through that and came out the other side? Or
it was when someone tells you that, think about 24 hours a day and every minute that touches on your brain in some capacity. Like, hey, I'm going to go see that. No, I better not go see that. Hey, I'm going to write a new act. No, you better not write it. That's a waste of time. You're not going to be able to do it. It's always you get the old brain telling you what you're going to do, and the new brain telling you that it's not possible to do. So, and then you think you're going to be dead every day. I could be not wake up or have a heart attack, and just hope it's quick. No, it's torture. It's the worst torture that anybody could ever give you. It's the worst thing that could happen. But then after a year goes by, then 2 years go by, then a third year goes by, you're like, fuck this. I'm going to take my mind off. I got to have something to take my mind off of this. I'm going to go back to work. I'm going back to work. So when I went back to work, it was fun, but I wasn't able to do it because I got too tired. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
It definitely sounds like you had a good last little tour to come back, after retiring, coming back just to have a little more fun. And it also goes to show kind of like, that the stage becomes the playground, right? Like, being able to perform everywhere in Vegas and in comedy clubs and in strip clubs and on the street and everywhere, like that's the fun, right? That's the fun to have. So I'm sure it was fun to go back there and just kick it, and for the fans around the world who wanted to come watch the last tour.
Yeah, the fans were unbelievable, because the reason I did it was because everybody was complaining about not being able to see the show before they died. And I was like, okay, so if I did go out, there's going to be a hell of a lot of people coming to see the show that had never seen it, and I'm gonna go out and do it for them. And so the people who showed up were hardcore fans and people who had never seen the show. So it was a perfect audience. And afterwards, people were coming up, and everybody was crying. They'd come up to buy merchandise or get a picture with me, and they were all crying. And it was a very sad, bittersweet kind of a deal, And I got to hear a million stories of people telling me what I meant to them in their lives, and when their dad had cancer. And the last thing he did before he died was he's watching me on TV laughing, and they never thought he would ever laugh again. You get real heartbreaking stories. I had people take helicopters, like evac medical helicopters, to see the show, and people were coming out in crazy droves to see the show, and it was great. It was the same show they remembered, but when it started to be hard for me to stand up, and I had to sit down during the last half of the show, it got to be like, this isn't the way the show was. The show has always been a high energy show, and so certainly they understand why I'm doing it, but I don't want them to see me like this. I had a big old computer I had to have on for breathing, and in case my heart attack happened, and it wasn't the same. So I just stopped doing it. My hands would lock up, my feet would lock up. I had to lay down because I was dizzy. And then some of the shows didn't do that. Some of them were perfect. So I wanted them all to be perfect. So if something happens where I feel better, trust me, I'll be back on the road. But I doubt whether that's ever going to happen.
I'm excited from all of the Amazing Jonathan I've ever seen, and if it does happen, I'd love to be there. And if it doesn't happen, you've created amazing magic. And like you said, if you want to do it, buy buy it from you. I love that. I thought it was funny, but you've road tested, you've awoken a whole field that really is comedy magic. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things because of the magic that you did in the performances, that you did in the way that you put your magic together and your comedy together. So thank you for all of that. If you have advice for somebody right now who is trying to either follow along a similar journey or rather build a career. One thing you can see very clearly in your story is that it is one step at a time. It goes from doing a show and failing to working on the street to working at a comedy club to a strip. It's like it is one step at a time, slowly over 30 or 40 years. Or so if you see someone entering that, what kind of advice or wisdom do you have for them?
The one thing is to get respect from your peers is the best thing that you can get. If you do that, that's when you know you're on the right track. Don't just play for the audience. Play for yourself and be true to yourself, and you will find that people who are important, that matter, like your show. I mean, that's one gauge that I used. It's really helped me along. Like when George Carlin tells you you're good, or when the people that were in the documentary, Weird Al Yankovic, and people that respect, that's what makes you feel good. That's what made me feel good. And I knew I was doing the right thing and right, when they would say, good job, like I was their hero. Like, I was their hero? Are you serious? You never expect that to happen. Like when Prince calls you out of the blue and says, I'm your biggest fan, or David Letterman says, I'm your biggest fan, then you're doing something right. And you're never going to get that unless you write original material ever. So, you can take from somebody you admire, you can take their style, you can take a few jokes at first, but you better dump them before you're busted, and start figuring out why it's funny and write your own original shit. And if you write, here's the best advice somebody gave me. If you keep writing, all the doors open by themselves. If you sit down every day and you write 10, 20 minutes, whether it's crap or not, the doors will all open for you. Your agent, you'll get an agent, get a comedy club, you'll get everything that you should be getting, you'll get by just sitting down for those days and writing.
The volume speaks volumes, I guess. That's lovely advice. I love that. And I think, where I guess I was looking to wonder if things are maybe different now or there's different advice now, it's good to know that the tactics and, it's all the same, which is keep writing, keep creating more material,
do math. Oh yeah, do math.
Oh, do math. Oh, good.
I'm kidding.
I'm just kidding. Okay, don't do math. Sometimes we have like escape artists on here and they tell people not to try it at home, but for you, really, don't try it at home. Near the end of the episode, we've got a bunch of wrap-up questions. So some questions we ask each guest as they come on. The first is about sort of current magic culture. What's something going on in the world of magic right now that you like, and something going on in the world of magic right now that you don't like?
Well, I like the fact that you can go on the internet. It used to drive me crazy when you couldn't get the secret to a trick, And the thing I dislike is that you can go on the internet and you can get the secret to any trick. Those are the things I like best, and that bugs me. I mean, it's really cool to be able to. When I learned, it was from a book, and you can't. It's so hard to learn from a book, but it's nice to be able to watch somebody doing it. But it's certainly probably not doing anybody who invents a trick to watch it go right to China and get sold for half the price. What do you think? The internet's good or bad for the...
I think the internet's a good thing for magic. It's hard for me to imagine not. It's hard for me to imagine that taking all the magic off the internet would be a sentence that even makes remote sense. So...
Yeah, you couldn't do that. But you know what? It's like the guy on TV everybody hates giving away the magic tricks. It's the mass magician on a huge level. Why do people hate the mass magician when they do that? When they go on the internet and look at the secrets? He's kind of doing the same thing.
I mean, the hope is that I think the challenge might be to create magic that is either not discoverable or not so basic, or you have to think outside the box a little bit and create something that's either ungoogleable or be so entertaining or funny that it's not the point, or create original material.
The trick is to find something ungoogleable.
Right.
Googleable?
Yeah, ungoogleable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not easy to do.
It is not easy to do, but like you said, writing and creating opens up doors. On that regard, it feels like you don't hold the secret to magic as like a very like, oh, it's a secret. Oh, like
No,
it doesn't.
I don't know. I never did. I love telling how the tricks were done. I mean, to me, not to everybody, but to me, half the fun was telling how the trick was done. That's what gets people curious about magic, is just learning how the trick is done, and they go, "Oh my God, I could do that."
I agree. I think teaching magic is just as fulfilling as performing it. Like,
that's right, man. It is. You should have to give them one step to see if to prove themselves to be able to get the secret. Like, here's the website. I'll give you the website if you really want to learn it. Go to this website.
Yeah. I agree. I think it should be as difficult as one step away. Like,
there's a lot of tricks out there that you don't have to worry about that. There's so many tricks, and the tricks are so much better today than they were. I mean, the kids that are inventing magic, so much more of it. So much. The quality of magic is so much better because of magic on the internet.
Totally. I think it's an amazing thing. The next question in the final wrap-up questions is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest who absolutely must be on the show. Who must we have featured on the show?
Boy, oh boy. You probably have had everybody that I've had on. You've had Steve Valentine on?
No, but he actually does live close to me, so I'll be having him on soon.
Steve Valentine's good. Matt King's good.
Yeah, Matt King would be great.
Mike Hammer.
Also great. Amazing. Those are three great recommendations.
Mike Hammer is probably me 25 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who else right now would you give us the Amazing Johnathan seal of approval for, comedy magic right now?
Jeez, just Mike Hammer. He's better than everybody. I love his stuff.
Amazing. The next section is the take-home point. So everyone's been listening to us talk about magic for an hour and a half, basically, about everything under the sun, and they're going to think back to the episode and remember probably just one thing. What one thing is that for you that you'd like people to remember?
Never resort to cheap skill to be really, really good. You can use what I use. There's nothing skillful in my act, really, except for the talk,
Right.
So my motto is never resort to cheap skill. You can make it whether you're a great magician or not. It doesn't really matter. It's your personality that carries through.
I love that, and I think that it's a good thing to remember. One of the messages of this podcast is that, like, there's unlimited tricks, unlimited methods, and all of that is probably not necessarily the most important part of performing or entertaining or creating or business in magic or anything like that. So I love that advice.
Yeah. My name on my next special is "Drive It Like You Stole It," which is also good advice.
Drive it like you stole it. I love that.
Yep.
That's so good. And the last and final thing is plugs. So where can people go to find these documentaries, and where can people go to find you?
The first documentary is called Always Amazing. It's on YouTube. All Things Comedy that's the name of the site. But just type in Always Amazing. The other documentary is in theaters right now in LA and New York. You can see it in theaters for another week, and then you can also see it on Hulu. One of the plugs. I've written an autobiography that's finished now and will be published, and I've written a joke book which I'm working on, which is going to be the ultimate joke book. It's going to have jokes for magicians. It's going to have routines. It's going to have how to be funny. It's going to have just the best of everything joke-wise.
Those are two things that I did not know that I'm very, very excited about. Where can people go to keep up to date with when those things will be released?
My website.
AmazingJonathan.com?
AmazingJonathan.com works.
I guessed it, and I'm glad I guessed it right. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for all the advice. This has been lovely.
Yeah, you did a great job. Thanks for talking with me.
Thanks for all the advice and all the laughs and this is a lot of information for magicians to go out there and do and work and create and write, and I like actionable advice, and I think there was a lot of it here. So thank you so much for that, and for everyone, I will see you all next Thursday.
There's one more thing.
Go ahead.
There's a Penguin Lectures putting out the lecture that I did on comedy, on how to do comedy table tricks, which is a great video.
Is that out already?
Because, it's coming out, I think, this week or next week. But, Penguin did a great job. It was done at a dinner table. It's how to get laughs at the dinner table. And it's got every single old gag in the world in there. It's really valuable.
Well, that is exciting as well. More Amazing Johnathan content and more Amazing Johnathan stuff.
All right, man.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Well, there you go. I hope that you liked the episode, and I hope that you learned something. Take a moment and think about what your favorite part of the episode was, and make sure you put it into action. And if that favorite part for you is really special, do me a favor and share it with the world. Tell somebody about what you learned. Tell them on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Snapchat. You can tell someone on Tinder. You can tell your local magic club. You can send an email. You can shout at the door. I don't care how, but please spread the word about what we're doing here. Tell the world about Discourse in Magic. Thank you as always, and I'll see you next Thursday. Peace.